Beyond the Gate spoilers tease that Ted's fury ignites when Nicole begins to spend more and more time with Carlton. The weight of betrayal already hangs over Nicole's heart, because ever since she learned that Ted had been unfaithful with Leslie, her ability to trust him had been shattered. No matter how many excuses Ted made or how many attempts he offered to patch over the wound, Nicole could not erase the image of him choosing someone else over her, and she could not forget the sharp humiliation that came with the whispers Leslie allowed to spread. Their marriage had begun as a partnership of ambition and desire, but what was once strong had rotted at its core. Leslie did not just intrude, she lingered, needling into Ted's life, demanding favors, pressing for money, pressing for recognition. To Nicole, every phone call from Leslie, every sudden appearance at their gatherings, was another reminder of her husband's weakness and her own growing sense of entrapment. Nicole had long been walking on the edge of a decision to end it all, and now with Carlton's unexpected presence, she found herself with a new perspective on what freedom might feel like. Ted's breaking point began not in a blaze of fury, but in the slow burn of humiliation. He had caught Nicole in a moment of laughter with Carlton, a man who wasn't just another presence in their social circle, but his own business partner. The sound of her laugh, the brightness in her face, was something he had not seen directed at him in years. It cut deep, though he knew he had forfeited the right to it long ago. Carlton's charisma made it worse. He was polished, confident, unafraid of confrontation, a mirror image of everything Ted wished he still embodied. Yet Ted bit down on his rage, masking it behind forced smiles and shallow politeness, because the stakes of his professional life pressed down harder than his pride. The contract he had been negotiating with Carlton promised to stabilize his company at a time when it teetered precariously. Without Carlton's backing, the numbers would fall apart. The fear of watching his career collapse forced Ted to endure the indignity of watching his wife draw closer to another man. But when Nicole declared her decision clear, firm, and without a tremor of doubt that she would be divorcing him, Ted felt the last thread snap. There was no pretense left to uphold. Carlton was no longer just a rival in shadow. He was suddenly a direct threat to everything Ted clung to. In a heated confrontation, Ted demanded that Carlton back away from Nicole, asserting with desperation that she was still his wife. Carlton, almost amused by the display, laughed off the claim. When Nicole confirmed that Ted was now her ex-husband, Carlton twisted the knife further with mockery. The laughter was cruel in its dismissal, reducing Ted's pain to entertainment. The rage that boiled over was uncontrollable. Ted lunged forward, fists flying, striking Carlton in a violent release that shocked everyone present. The aftermath was instantaneous. Carlton, furious and humiliated in turn, made his intent to withdraw from the contract clear. What Ted had feared most was now inevitable. The blow landed not just on Carlton's face, but on Ted's own fragile empire. The financial loss loomed over him like a storm that would not pass. Nicole, in the days following, did not weep for the collapse of Ted's deals. Her heart had long since detached from his concerns. When she recounted the endless exhaustion of being tethered to a marriage plagued by a third party, her voice carried the weight of years. Leslie had not simply been a mistake. She had been a recurring shadow, feeding on the cracks and deepening them, manipulating Ted's guilt into monetary gain. To Nicole, it was a theater of humiliation she could no longer endure. She confided in her sister Dani, speaking of the fatigue that came with constantly measuring her worth against an intruder's presence. Dani listened with the empathy of someone who had known betrayal herself. She shared how she had clawed her way out of pain, how she had stitched herself back together after heartbreak by daring to love again. Her survival was proof that freedom was possible. Nicole absorbed every word, the resolve in her sharpening until the decision to sever her marriage felt less like rebellion and more like an act of survival. The leap toward freedom carried with it not only relief but also curiosity. Nicole began to see in Carlton a possibility, not just for companionship, but for the chance to rewrite her story. He was reckless, yes, but he was alive in ways Ted no longer was. He listened with a focus that Ted never offered, and his confidence made her feel valued instead of invisible. To her, Carlton represented not a fairy tale, but a daring step towards self-discovery. The thought of exploring this connection excited her, not because she was searching for salvation, but because she finally wanted something for herself without guilt. Ted's looming shadow would no longer dictate her steps. While the Dupri sisters savored the small victories of reclaiming joy, their mother Anita stood on the brink of collapse beneath revelations she never anticipated. Leslie, never content to fade quietly, surfaced again with venom in her tongue. She came not merely to antagonize Ted, but to unearth something darker, something about Vernon, the man Anita once believed she knew intimately. The revelation Leslie carried was enough to make Anita's blood boil, a truth so cutting that it threatened to unravel the foundation of her family's history. Anita, already weary from watching her daughters suffer through betrayals and fractured loves, now faced the prospect of confronting a past that had been carefully buried. Her world tilted as anger surged through her veins, a tempest she could neither contain nor ignore. The secrets Leslie unearthed promised to splinter not just Anita's trust, but the legacy she thought she had secured for her children. The household became a battlefield of emotions, each person spiraling within their own storms. Ted, stripped of his marriage and staring down professional ruin, sank into desperation. He replayed the fight with Carlton in his mind, each punch echoing like a mistake carved into stone. The company that once defined his pride now threatened to collapse into ashes. He tried to reach Nicole, begging her to reconsider, to remember the years they had built together. But Nicole was unshaken, her resolve stronger with every plea. For her, Ted's desperation only underscored the truth. His loyalty was to himself, never to her. Danny urged her sister to stay strong, reminding her that the courage to walk away was a rare strength. Nicole listened, holding fast to her choice even as the weight of the unknown future pressed on her shoulders. The contrast between Nicole's newfound liberation and Ted's unraveling painted a stark picture. Carlton, though smug in his victory over Ted, revealed sides of himself that were not so easy to embrace. He enjoyed winning, perhaps too much, and his confidence sometimes veered into arrogance. Nicole, while drawn to him, began to see that her freedom was not simply about exchanging one man for another, but about finding space for herself. Carlton's laughter, once charming, sometimes grated on her nerves when it carried the same dismissive edge Ted had wielded. Yet she pushed these doubts aside, eager to experience the thrill of a new chapter. For her, Carlton was a stepping stone into a life unburdened by Ted's failures. Meanwhile, Anita wrestled with the venom Leslie had spilled. The name Vernon resurfaced like a ghost, dragging with it memories she had long locked away. Leslie claimed to know truths that would shatter Anita's image of him, truths that, if revealed, could change the course of the family forever. Anita's fury burned, but beneath it was dread. What if Leslie was right? What if the man she had defended and honored carried secrets that mocked her devotion? Anita's hands shook as she considered confronting Vernon's legacy, torn between denial and the need for answers. Her daughters sensed her turmoil, but could not yet understand its depth. To them, Anita was the rock of their family, the one who bore storms without breaking. But inside, cracks had begun to spread. Ted, too, found himself haunted by Leslie's continued presence. Though Nicole had cast him aside, Leslie clung to him like a parasite, exploiting his vulnerabilities with threats and demands. She whispered about the money he owed, the promises he made in moments of weakness, and the power she still held over his reputation. Ted lashed out in anger, but every outburst only tightened Leslie's grip. He began to realize that his downfall was not merely the loss of Nicole or Carlton's contract, it was the web of compromises he had spun around himself, each strand binding him closer to ruin. As nights grew longer and tempers flared, the Dupri family stood at the edge of transformation. Nicole's determination to seek freedom, Danny's hard-won resilience, Anita's brewing storm, Ted's crumbling empire, Carlton's dangerous allure, and Leslie's poisonous interference all collided in a dance of betrayal and awakening. Every choice carved a path deeper into the unknown, every revelation hinting at darker truths still to come. The fallout of Ted's violent clash with Carlton echoed across every corner of their lives, but its deepest consequences emerged in ways none of them anticipated. Carlton, though outwardly composed after the altercation, carried the sting of public humiliation like a scar. He had been mocked before, but never struck, never stripped of his power in front of an audience. His decision to terminate the contract with Ted's company was both a business move and an act of vengeance, designed to leave Ted gasping for stability. Yet beneath his triumph, a subtle shift began to show. His connection with Nicole, once playful and electric, began to blur under the weight of real complications. Carlton had thought he was stepping into a romance that would flatter his ego, but Nicole's honesty and resilience challenged him in ways he had not expected. She was not content to be a prize won from another man. She wanted to carve a life on her own terms, and Carlton, for all his charm, struggled to adapt to a woman who demanded not submission but respect. Nicole, fresh in her freedom, began to sense the thin line between liberation and dependency. The excitement of exploring something new with Carlton was undeniable, but her instincts warned her not to repeat old mistakes. Ted had once dazzled her with confidence too, only for that facade to crumble into infidelity and manipulation. Carlton's laughter, though intoxicating at first, now carried hints of arrogance that reminded her too much of what she had left behind. Nicole did not want to belong to someone, she wanted to belong to herself. That realization was frightening and empowering all at once. While she continued to see Carlton, she began to shift the boundaries, ensuring that this time, she set the pace. Ted, meanwhile, slipped further into darkness. The collapse of the deal with Carlton placed his company on the brink of disaster. Once he had prided himself on being untouchable in business, a man who could weather storms. Now he found himself scrambling, desperate to salvage what little credibility remained. Every phone call felt like a reminder of his dwindling influence, every unanswered message a door slamming shut. His anger toward Nicole grew poisonous, though deep down, he recognized it was anger at himself. The betrayal with Leslie had cost him everything: his marriage, his dignity, his empire. But instead of accountability, Ted sought enemies to blame. Carlton was the obvious target, but so too was Nicole, whose determination to be free burned like an accusation he couldn't silence. Leslie, as always, lurked on the edges, waiting for opportunities to twist the knife. Her revelation about Vernon had already shaken Anita, but Leslie's motives were layered. She thrived on the chaos she sowed, feeding off the fractures in the Dupri family. To Leslie, every truth revealed was a weapon, every secret unearthed a tool for leverage. She continued to bleed Ted for money, reminding him that their affair had created debts not easily erased. Leslie dangled hints about Vernon in Anita's direction, never revealing everything at once, savoring the power of holding pieces of the puzzle others desperately wanted. She had become a storm in human form, unpredictable and merciless, and her intrusion threatened to tear apart what little unity the family still clung to. Anita, for her part, found herself consumed by the specter of Vernon's hidden past. The revelation Leslie brought was not just idle gossip, it was a fracture in her memory, a suggestion that the man she once loved may have lived a double life. Every whispered detail Leslie hinted at clawed at Anita's composure. Was Vernon faithful? Was he honest? Or had he, like Ted, allowed betrayal to rot the core of what they had built? Anita's fury simmered, but beneath it was pain at the possibility that the years she had spent building her family rested on lies. She began quietly searching for answers, piecing together fragments of Vernon's life, determined to uncover the truth no matter how much it might devastate her. Dani emerged as the unexpected pillar among them. Having clawed her way out of heartbreak before, she recognized the destructive patterns repeating themselves in her family. She spoke to Nicole not as a sister offering sympathy, but as a survivor offering a roadmap. Danny urged Nicole to guard her independence, to remember that freedom was not found in another man's arms, but in her own. Her voice carried a calm strength, forged by scars, and Nicole leaned on her as she wavered between desire for Carlton and her need to heal. Danny also confronted Anita, offering quiet support as their mother's world began to unravel. Anita, though fierce in her own right, allowed herself to soften in those moments, finding comfort in Danny's steady presence. The storm gathered pace when Carlton, emboldened by his growing bond with Nicole, attempted to cement his role in her life more forcefully. He enjoyed her fire, but he underestimated her boundaries. At a dinner meant to celebrate their new connection, Carlton spoke carelessly about Ted, mocking him in front of Nicole as though her past could be reduced to a punchline. Nicole bristled, reminding him sharply that her history was not fodder for his amusement. Carlton was taken aback, unaccustomed to being challenged. The tension between them grew, not explosive but insidious, as Nicole began to question whether he truly saw her as more than a conquest. Ted, watching from the outside, spiraled deeper into desperation. With his company teetering on the edge, he considered reckless moves, illegal shortcuts, manipulations that could salvage his finances, but at a cost far greater than money. Leslie, sensing his vulnerability, tightened her hold. She threatened to expose details of their affair in ways that could destroy what little reputation Ted still had. Trapped between financial ruin and public disgrace, Ted began to crack under the pressure. His anger transformed into obsession, his focus narrowing on Carlton and Nicole as though destroying their connection could somehow restore his own dignity. Anita, meanwhile, uncovered fragments of Vernon's past that chilled her. Documents, whispers from old acquaintances, subtle inconsistencies in stories she had long believed, all painted a picture of a man who may not have been the saint she remembered. The revelation was not only betrayal but disorientation. Who was Vernon truly? Was the life she built with him grounded in truth or illusion? Her daughters sensed her torment, but Anita carried much of it alone, determined to confront the truth directly. Leslie's smirk each time they crossed paths only deepened Anita's fury, fueling her determination to strip away the lies no matter the cost. As tensions escalated, the Dupri family found themselves entangled in battles, both external and internal. Nicole fought for her right to define herself beyond Ted and beyond Carlton, realizing that true freedom might mean standing alone. Danny continued to guard her newfound peace, wary of the ways old wounds could reopen. Anita's pursuit of Vernon's truth threatened to unearth secrets that could fracture their family beyond repair. Ted, cornered and unraveling, became increasingly volatile, his actions reckless and unpredictable. Carlton, though outwardly confident, began to reveal cracks of insecurity when Nicole resisted the control he was used to exerting. And Leslie, relentless and cunning, wove herself through their lives like poison, determined to ensure that none of them escaped unscathed. The convergence of these paths promised collision. Nicole's struggle for independence, Ted's descent into obsession, Carlton's arrogance, Anita's quest for truth, Danny's fragile stability, and Leslie's manipulations all hurtled toward an inevitable breaking point. The family that once stood united by love now faced the prospect of being shattered by betrayal, greed, and the relentless pull of secrets long buried. The gates they each stood before were no longer just metaphors, they were choices, thresholds into futures that would demand sacrifices, reveal loyalties, and expose truths none of them were ready to face. The final unraveling began quietly, with silences heavier than words. Nicole, once caught between fury and longing, now stood at a crossroads with clarity hard-earned. She had watched Ted collapse into a shadow of himself, had witnessed Carlton's charm dim under scrutiny, and had borne the weight of her mother's torment and her sister's caution. For the first time in years, Nicole felt that the path forward did not require her to orbit around any man. It required her to walk through the wreckage on her own terms. Yet her choice would not come without sparks, because Ted, unwilling to surrender, was determined to drag her back into the chaos with him. Ted's obsession reached its peak one night when he confronted Nicole outside her home. The man who once carried himself with polished confidence now appeared haggard, desperation etched into every line of his face. He pleaded, demanded, even threatened, insisting that Nicole's departure had destroyed him, that she owed him a chance to rebuild. Nicole's voice, calm but unyielding, cut through his tirade. "I don't owe you my freedom. You gave that away the moment you chose Leslie over us." Ted's fury snapped. He lunged not with fists this time, but with words sharp enough to wound, accusing her of betrayal with Carlton, accusing her of reveling in his downfall. Yet Nicole did not falter. She turned her back, leaving him to stew in his own unraveling. In that moment, Ted realized he had lost more than a wife. He had lost the last tether to his humanity. Carlton, witnessing Ted's collapse, tried to step in as a savior, but Nicole resisted him too. His arrogance, once tolerable as the glitter of new attraction, had become a weight. He spoke of building a future together as though she were a conquest to be claimed. Nicole rejected the offer, not with cruelty but with finality. She thanked him for showing her that she could feel alive again, but she made it clear she would not trade one cage for another. Carlton's pride took the blow, but beneath his indignation, he respected her resolve. For perhaps the first time, he recognized that Nicole was not a prize between men, she was her own victory. Danny, standing at her sister's side, felt relief that Nicole had reached this point. Her own scars had taught her the cost of repeating patterns, and she had feared Nicole might stumble into another cycle of dependency. Instead, she watched as her sister chose strength. Danny's own journey, though quieter, had blossomed into something stable. She had found love again, but it was love on her terms, respectful, balanced, healing. In Nicole's defiance, Danny saw her own story reflected, proof that survival could transform into resilience, and resilience into freedom. Anita's revelation about Vernon reached its conclusion when she confronted Leslie one final time. Leslie, ever hungry for chaos, delivered the last piece of truth with a venomous smile. Vernon had not only betrayed Anita's trust, but had left behind debts and secrets that explained much of the turmoil that followed. For Anita, the knowledge was both devastating and liberating. The man she had clung to in memory was not the pillar she believed him to be. Her anger gave way to grief, but beneath it pulsed a newfound strength. She realized that the foundation of her family did not rest on Vernon, it rested on her and the daughters she had raised through storms. Anita turned her fury back on Leslie, not with violence, but with the sharp clarity of someone who had nothing left to lose. She cut Leslie out, declaring that her venom would no longer have a place in their lives. Leslie, stripped of her power in that instant, slithered away, her smirk faltering for the first time. For Ted, the end came swiftly and mercilessly. His company collapsed under the weight of broken contracts and bad decisions, his reputation shredded by whispers of scandal. Leslie, once his accomplice, abandoned him when there was nothing left to take. Alone and bitter, Ted became a cautionary tale of ambition poisoned by betrayal and pride. He watched from the sidelines as Nicole walked forward into a future that no longer included him. The bitterness consumed him, but no one was left to care. Nicole's final act of liberation was quiet but profound. She moved into a new space, one that reflected not wealth or status, but peace. She filled it with light, with pieces that spoke of her journey, with silence that no longer felt empty but free. Carlton's shadow faded, Ted's fury dissolved, Leslie's poison evaporated, Vernon's lies lost their hold. What remained was a woman who had faced betrayal, humiliation, and manipulation, and had chosen herself above all. Danny and Nicole, sitting together one evening, shared a moment of stillness. The storm had passed, though the scars would always remain. Anita joined them, her strength softened by vulnerability, her daughters holding her in the way she had once held them. For the first time in years, the Dupri women felt united not by survival but by choice. They had endured betrayals that could have broken them, yet here they were, whole in their own imperfect ways. The gates they had each faced. The gates of betrayal, freedom, truth, and survival were now behind them. Ahead lay uncertainty, but it was theirs to walk through, not dictated by the men who once sought to control their stories. Nicole's laughter returned, not sparked by Ted or Carlton, but by her own sense of renewal. Danny smiled, knowing healing was no longer a dream but a reality. Anita, though still carrying the sting of Vernon's truth, found solace in the strength of her daughters. And Leslie, drifting in the shadows, remained a figure of chaos searching for her next target. But for the Dupri women, her power had been broken. They no longer feared her whispers or her schemes. The family she sought to destroy had chosen to rise instead. The ending was not a clean slate. It was layered with scars and memories, regrets and lessons. Yet it was also alive with possibility. Each of them had stepped through their own gates, and in doing so, they had discovered that survival was only the beginning. What came next was freedom, and with it, the chance to finally live on their own terms.